Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Monday, December 20th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Rose Bowl game against Utah in 12 days, the game against Michigan in 342 days. Before we get started on football talk today, a quick note that the Ohio State men's basketball game against UT Martin that had been scheduled for Tuesday night was canceled due to the continued COVID outbreak on the OSU team. That game will not be rescheduled. All right, that's enough to basketball. On to the football. Something that did happen, the early signing period for the 2022 class is now in the books. The Buckeyes added linebacker Gabe Powers on Friday. Offensive lineman Carson Hinsman tweeted out, quote, "The schools I'm so fortunate to be deciding from are so incredible that it's making my decision extremely tough, and I'm going to need just a little bit more time," unquote. So still playing the waiting game on offensive lineman Carson Hinsman, who's presumably deciding between Ohio State and Wisconsin. That'll be a big one for the Buckeyes. As with the early signing period done and the February signing period still about a month and a half away, it seemed like this would be a good time to look back at what the Buckeyes still do need to add to round out their 2022 class. Carson Hinsman definitely would be on that list. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop's Alex Gleitman. I guess, first of all, Alex, this year's class is currently ranked fourth in the nation, and that's with substantially fewer commits than anyone else in the top seven. So while this is a pretty good class overall, it seems like maybe their work isn't quite done yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the class, and as you said, Tom, I think the biggest thing is to remember is that they have 18 members in this class, and you look at everyone else's list, 24, 25, maybe even more than that, at least 22. So that's like four more players than Ohio State currently has, at least publicly committed. There might have been a few guys who signed and might be announcing at the All-Star games and things of that nature, or might be waiting, kind of just enrolling at their choice and not signing in this early period. But I think pound for pound, if you look at the class, it's just as good as pretty much anyone else's, in the country, whatever system you want to use. Let's just say that for the 24/7 sports composite, I mean, their average player rating, I think, is the second best in the country, second or third best. So obviously, when you look at the quality of the class, it's excellent. The quantity, I think, is where they fall short a little bit. I don't want to say concerned, but I think when you look at this class and you look at, bringing 18 guys in who they might be losing to the NFL early, who's, seniors and moving on, whether that's NFL or to life after football. And then you look at the number of guys they lost in the portal. I don't want to say I'm concerned right now, but I think when you look at the numbers at Ohio State, I mean, it will all work out at the end of the day come September, but I think they're a little thin right now. And I think that there's certain positions you look at the defensive line where they're waiting on a couple guys still in this class. I think the offensive line, they could have afforded to get, another guy or two, at least one. I think they should have added two more, and they might be getting one more that's still out there, maybe signing in February in Carson Hinsman. And then, I think defensive back, they lost Jaheim Singletary a few months back. They never really replaced him. And then they lost Terrence Brooks on National Signing Day. He flipped to Texas at Taki's National Signing Day down in Frisco, Texas, which I was at. And, that was a surprise, given what the Brooks camp was kind of telling Ohio State in the days leading up to signing day. So, I think that there was probably, as we talked about before the show a little bit, defensive back. I mean, they missed on Xavier Wampa, Zion Branch. I mean, Lincoln Riley just came in and saved that for USC. I thought they would at least get one of those guys, if not both of them, a few weeks ago, let alone, months ago. So I just think defensive back, defensive line, and offensive line are the three areas where quantity and a little bit more quality they could have used in this class. And I think, there could be a help on the way at offensive line, and there could be some more help on the way in the defensive line. But I think everywhere else, they're going to have to look to the portal.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I did want to get your perspective on the Terrence Brooks thing, because you were right there. You were down in Texas at that event where he was announcing it. And, this is the third time when in the last, four classes at Ohio State's had a defensive back go right up to early signing day, committed to the Buckeyes. Jordan Battle did it. Clark Phillips just did it, and then flip. And there's not a lot of time to adjust on the fly. But that's a tough spot for the program to be in, because, I mean, to your point, maybe you can share a little bit more about what, he was sort of sharing with Ohio State in the lead up to that, because they can't necessarily go and just go, well, we'll replace him in the class, because then you're perceived as chasing him out. I mean, that has to put the program in a tough spot if, that he's not decommitting weeks or months in advance. It's day of, boom, he's gone.
Yeah, and I think that's the argument against the early signing period. A lot of coaches don't love that early period because there are so many coaching changes during this time of the year, and that forces a lot of decommitments, a lot of flips late in the game. And I think people throw out the number 75% of kids signed during the early period. I think it's probably more when you talk about the kids actually Ohio State would be willing to take in a class. It's probably 90% plus of the kids that they feel are quality enough players to play at Ohio State and good enough people and good enough students and things like that to play at Ohio State. You're probably talking about 90%, if not more. So to your point, you can't just go out now and hope to get someone just as good or even close to as good as Terrence Brooks at this point. And so I think with Terrence Brooks, I mean, Texas was in home twice over the last 2 weeks leading up to signing day, obviously the assistants and then head coach Steve Sarkisian. So they obviously knew something was going on. I mean, 2 weeks still isn't enough to kind of go somewhere else and completely flip someone when I think everyone was out there negatively recruiting against Ohio State. What's going to happen with their defensive staff? They're bringing a new defensive coordinator who's getting fired. Kerry Combs was the defensive coordinator. He lost his job. He's probably the guy out. And those were the things. I'm not saying Texas, I'm not accusing anyone, but I can tell you sources are indicating across the board, not just with Texas, but with other programs. Those were the kinds of messages that guys like Terrence Brooks and Xavier Wampa and Zion Branch were getting from all over the country from people trying to lure them away from Ohio State, the uncertainty of the Ohio State defensive staff. And I think, you think about a February period, all those things are settled. I mean, some of these guys are going to enroll early, so it would have had to have been settled kind of by early to mid-January at the latest. But without the force signing in the middle of December, some of those things could be settled by the time those kids actually have to make a decision. And so if Ohio State's going to retain Kerry Combs, they could come out and they told Terrence Brooks, everything that they thought that he wanted to hear about Kerry Combs and the future of the Ohio State defensive staff. But from what I heard in Texas, they just didn't trust that enough to be able to make this big of a decision and stick with Ohio State if Kerry Combs wasn't going to be there. I think there were other factors at play. We can probably set a whole other podcast aside on that, and I feel like you guys have already. But it's so tough. I mean, Jordan Battle, Urban Meyer stepping down, that obviously played a big role in that one. And Clark Phillips, it was Jeff Hafley leaving. So 3 big defensive backs not coming to Ohio State, and it's really because of 2 coaching changes there, and then 1, I guess, what you would call coaching uncertainty in this one. And so I am a fan of the early signing period. I think it's good. But I almost think that like the kids who are locked in should be able to lock in maybe right before their high school season start. So a guy like CJ Hicks can sign, let's call it by September 1st or something like that. And so Ohio State would then know who's really, really firm as far as who's committed, and then who really isn't so firm. And if a guy like Terrence Brooks, who was committed on June 30th, doesn't sign on September 1st, you kind of got a problem, and you probably have to look around that. At least he's going to be looking around as well. So that's kind of my opinion, long-winded opinion on the matter. And I know that a lot of coaches across college football don't love the early period because of, the timing, and it's not really ideal with all the coaching changes following the season.
That is interesting. The idea of maybe doing it over the summer where it's like early decision or early. It's been a million years since I applied to college, but back in the Stone Age, you could apply early decision to a school, and if you were accepted, you had to go there. Like that was your choice. Like you're sort of locking in. I wonder if they could do that where, that might, you get rid of the, if you do that, you get rid of the right to the one-time transfer or something.
Or change it. Whereas like if the coach recruiting you leaves or something like that, if there's a coaching change, you have the ability to get out of your LOI and go somewhere else. I don't know. There's definitely something they could do, because it also not only affects recruiting, it affects coaching decisions. I mean, look, I'm not saying Notre Dame was going to hire Luke Fickell or that Luke Fickell was going to take that job, but if Cincinnati wasn't in the playoff, I think Luke Fickell would have been a much more serious candidate for Notre Dame. I don't think he could leave Cincinnati right now, with about to go to the college football playoff. I mean, they have a chance to win a national championship, whether, you laugh at that or not. They legitimately Ohio State doesn't have a chance to win a championship. Cincinnati has a chance to win a championship. So Luke Fickell could not leave Cincinnati this time, but if there was no early signing period and Notre Dame didn't have to lock in a coach in order to secure their class, they could have waited till early January, to see what happens with Cincinnati, and then made a move at Luke Fickell if that was the guy that they really wanted. Because I love Marcus Freeman. I'm very happy for him, but I don't know if he was their first choice. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that definitely changed the calendar quite a bit, and in a lot of different ways. You're seeing the firings get moved up. You're seeing the hirings get moved up. I go back to I covered the Buckeyes when Jim Tressel was hired, when they fired Cooper and hired Jim Tressel, and Jim Tressel came in like MLK Day. It was like January 18th, I think, of 2001. Couldn't pull that off today. So we've talked about we talked about some of those numbers. 18 guys committed right now compared to 27 for Texas. And everyone's looking at Texas and going, oh, look, Sark is reinventing everything. Ohio State is ahead of Texas, despite the fact that Texas has 9 more kids committed right now. And Ohio State obviously still adding to that class. You mentioned there's reason to think that one or more guys who is publicly announcing in January may have already signed, but not be counted in those numbers. You look at the publicly available numbers, and it's 2 defensive linemen, which would normally be complete panic time. Listening to Ryan Day last week, and just sort of it feels like they know that it's it's 2, but it's not. You sure don't get the sense that it's really 2 right now, and they feel like there's 1 or more guys who's either in or almost virtually certainly in, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at the defensive line targets, and Hero Canoe, defensive tackle, originally from Germany, playing out in California, and Amari Abor, defensive end from the state of Texas. I think those are 2 guys that they feel pretty good about. And, there's no confirmation firmly, but feel pretty good that at least one of those 2 guys has probably signed his letter of intent at this point. Is just going to make an announcement at the All-Star game. So, I think those are 2 guys that certainly Canoe. You never know with Amari Abor. He's kind of been all over the map throughout his recruitment, but I think he's a guy that Ohio State feels really good about. And so that would give them 20, and it adds 2 more numbers on the defensive line, which I think is really, really important. And then, there's a guy in Christian Miller out there from the state of Georgia who at one point in early June made 2 visits to Ohio State within a week. We thought he was going to be a Buckeye. Then we thought he was going to be a Trojan. Then we thought he was going to be a Georgia Bulldog. I still would probably have him going to Georgia, but I think the door's open for Ohio State. He hasn't signed his letter of intent to our knowledge. And I think if he kind of goes until February or leaves it open at least for a few more weeks, although it's a dead period, you could still talk on the phone and message and things like that. And, I think Ohio State's got a chance to kind of jump in and maybe add Christian Miller to this class too. So that would be 3 excellent defensive linemen added to Kenyatta Jackson, who I love. And I think is actually, underranked a little bit. And then, offensive line, Carson Hinsman just announced he's not signing in the early period. He's going to sign in February. And that's a kid that it's Ohio State or Wisconsin. I think it's a little bit of a head versus heart situation. And so those are 4 guys that are still out there, all highly rated guys. And then, of course, you got the portal. And then, I think they're going to do their homework on everyone, JUCO guys, portal guys, and then high school guys who didn't sign that. Maybe you find a late bloomer or a steal. A guy like Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who plays a lot of football for Ohio State, was signed after the early period a few years back. And, it's a guy who those guys, their stock, if everyone had to sign by December 15th, I don't know if Javonte Jean-Baptiste would have ended up at Ohio State. But because, as I said, 90% plus of the guys that they'd normally be looking at signed, he was a guy who maybe if normally it was a middle tier to upper tier, big Power 5 school, now he was getting some elite type of looks from a school like Ohio State because supply and demand. So, they're going to scour every kid across the country, no matter what level they're playing at right now, and try to put the best pieces together to kind of add to this roster.
Yeah, it is. That is definitely a crazy time where guys who don't get a lot of attention beforehand. You think about DeJuan Jones. Like, what was DeJuan Jones? Thanksgiving of the year he signed, and then you get into the the late rush, or Enoch Vimahi was the same thing, where it was just you're not necessarily hearing a lot about these guys, and then all of a sudden, boom! In like January, Enoch Vimahi traveled from Hawaii to Columbus, I think. And in January decided this is a place I'd like to go. Okay. Like you really got to want it to do that. But, something that struck me that was really interesting was Mark Pantoni on early signing day tweeted something about the portal and basically what a time to be alive. It's early signing day and here I am like sorting through the portal. I read that and I thought, boy, that was, I took that as a little bit of a message like, hey, everyone, if you'd like to come play for Ohio State, we may be open for business right now. We may be actively looking in the portal. What is the biggest immediate need or needs that they have in the portal that they would like to try and solve for, the 2022 season?
Yeah, I think that was an interesting tweet. I think it was a little frustration at the state of college football right now and some of the things like Terrence Brooks flipping on signing day and things of that nature. NIL deals affecting recruiting when when they're not supposed to be per the rules and things like that. And then also to your point, kind of letting people know, hey, we're open for business. And so for me, I mean, I think the three most realistic positions are linebacker. I think they need immediate veteran help there, whether it's someone who starts or depth. Um, I think safety, look, they'll be probably pretty fortunate to get Josh Proctor back, but we saw this year they don't have much behind him at that free safety position. So I think that's an area, losing Terrence Brooks, possibly losing Seven Banks early, the Ryan Watts to the portal. I think cornerback is an area that they have to be looking in. So those are three for sure. I think tight end is an area. I mean, look, they hosted Austin Stogner from Oklahoma, who ended up going to South Carolina on an official visit. They thought they were going to get him, and obviously they didn't. So I think that they'd like to add a portal tight end because you got Cade Stover, you got Joe Royer, you got G. Scott Jr., you got Bennett Christian, you got Sam Hart, and none of those guys I mentioned are proven. Could they be really good? Sure. I mean, will they be really good? We just don't know. So I think they'd like to get a proven guy who could be their number one, at worst, their number two tight end and really bolster the depth there and add to the success of the offensive unit next year. And then let's see what happens. I mean, Mark, when we did this podcast last week, he mentioned wide receiver, that they went after a portal wide receiver last year just to get some veteran depth. I mean, with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson leaving, it is going to be a younger group next year outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, that is an area where they could look. I don't think so as much. I would have it down the list. I think running back is an area where I'm looking at because who knows what Mayan Williams decides. Is Marcus Crowley going to come back and be able to be healthy? Evan Pryor, I know there were some rumors about him. He kind of squashed those a little bit, but if he doesn't want to sit around and wait and someone's willing to kind of guarantee him a shot to play significant minutes next year, I mean, that's an area you got to look at too. So, and then of course, Travion Henderson probably only has 2 more years in Columbus. So if you could go into the portal and maybe get some depth at running back, but I think another position where I would absolutely go after someone is quarterback. I think they'd love to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. They'll have Devin Brown, they'll have Kyle McCord, and they'll have CJ Stroud. But I think if they could bring in a guy like a Chris Chuganoff or a Gunnar Hoke, who's a veteran guy who knows his place, can be a good leader, can kind of run with the 2s, run with the 3s, and just provide some quality depth, someone who can run the offense and isn't going to kind of be a deer in the headlights if they have to go into the game. I think that that's a position that I think that they would love to add. It doesn't have to be someone, again, supremely talented who they're going to bank on playing. This person would probably be the 3rd or 4th, quarterback into a game. God forbid, McCord and Stroud got hurt. But, I think that that's somewhere where they have to look as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because Ryan Day in the previous years has always talked about wanting to have 4 quarterbacks, and this year he said 3 or 4. So he still, I think, wants 4, but yeah, he may, it may not be quite as easy to pull a Chuganoff or a Hoke out of the portal as they have made it look in the past. But I think we know Mark Pantoni is probably looking, so and Mark Pantoni is pretty good at his job. So I think that's something that's going to be worth keeping an eye on. But yeah, you just mentioned a lot of positions, and we just talked about a lot of positions in terms of the February signing period. So yeah, there's going to be a whole lot to talk about and a whole lot to keep an eye on over the next few weeks. And the Buckeyes are playing a football game in a little less than 2 weeks as well. So should be a fun and busy time. Alex, thank you for joining me.
Always, Tom.
So yes, a week from today, the Buckeyes will be out in California at Disneyland. So that'll be a fun day for them. And then they'll get going on the the real nitty gritty of Rose Bowl prep out in California, but they'll be practicing all week. So we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about this week and next week as well in the lead up to that Rose Bowl game and early signing day done, but regular signing day still coming, portal, all that fun stuff. Lots of stuff to talk about. Coaching changes. Oh boy. I'm starting to feel like there is no college football off season, and that might really be true once again this year. So should be lots of stuff to talk about on all of our podcasts. You can find those on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify. Just search Buckeye Scoop. You can find Alex's podcast Around the Oval, which is a fantastic interview show. Has recruits on, has some of our Buckeye Scoop staff on. Lots of great stuff. So make sure you search for Around the Oval as well. You can subscribe right there. And also leave him and leave any of our other shows a 5-star rating and review, which we do appreciate. You can also find those shows on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. And if you are there, you can hit that bell, subscribe to our channel, and get notified every time we post a new live show, every time we post a new podcast, every time we post new interviews, whatever it is, it's all there at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.